Welcome to the Marvel Alliance podcast, where we cover anything and everything to do with the Marvel Universe. From the comics, TV, and movies, we will go from the Mojoverse to Earth 616 to the Nation. There, that's what it's. See, this is what happens when I change this to the Quantum Realm in order to bring the Marvel Universe right to you. I'm the man without fear, Chris.
I'm your friendly neighborhood Brent.
Alliance Assemble. Volume 120, 151. Geez, it's been a long week, Brent.
You know, it kind of feels that way, but we're here. We're at the end. We're at a movie review.
Yes, movie review. Yeah, we skip out on Thursday night to go see the movie, and we have entered into the first MCU project of Phase 5. So we've got a lot of things to say. We've got a lot of stuff to break down, theories, ideas, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we're hoping for. So, so how's your week been, Brent?
It's been good. Can't really complain too much. Wednesday was incredibly slow at work because the city basically shut down for the parade for the Chiefs because they won the Super Bowl. I did not go to the parade because that's where the people are, but I did stay and watch the parade, and basically that's what I accomplished at work that day. So it's pretty good.
I got Travis Hydes in the chat, a little ants marching.
One by one.
One by one. One by one. Yeah, long week. Glad it's over, and I got a 3-day weekend ahead of us, so looking forward to that. But yeah, so we've got got a lot of stuff to break down with this movie, so let us get to the network plugs out of the way. So we are part of the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network with 8 shows covering the wide-ranging geek and nerdom. To see the full schedule, check out the show notes below and subscribe to the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUAPod Network so you know when all the shows drop. We also got a Patreon, so if you want to throw a couple of shekels our way, we've got 2 tiers. We've got our $1 tiers, our tip jar to say, hey, you think we're doing a good job? And then we've got our $5 tier with ad-free episodes, early access episodes, and Patreon exclusive shows, including our Patreon show, We Can Watch This All Day, the Marvel Alliance MCU Rewatch. We've got 13 episodes up there, and we have just finished recording episode 14, Ant-Man. What timely thing that we did with that. So in about 2 weeks, the last Monday of the month, patrons, you will get that newest episode. We've also got the DC Alliance guys doing their DC through the years, so very similar to ours, but looking at all the DC projects. So we've also got a lot of older Patreon content out there, but we also want to thank our patrons. We cannot do this without your support. But if you're not a member of Patreon and you want to join us, go to www.patreon.com/GUA Network to join the patrons of the GUA. But if you can't join us on Patreon, we totally understand. But if you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcatcher your choice may be, we greatly appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, we want to thank our official sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com, for your omnibus hardcover collected edition needs. JP and the crew at OPB have got it going on with excellent customer service, immaculate packaging, ships around the world, and the new, we've got 2 kind of promotions. We've got the new pre-order has gone live this evening at that point. We got the reprint of the final volume of Brubaker's Captain America run. We've got the final volume of Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man. We've got the reprint of Alpha Flight coming back into print. We've got the final volume of Thor by Jason Aaron coming out. A lot of good stuff. And the 4th volume of Wolverine. Again, this was a huge month of Omnis, but also it is 2 years of Organic Price books being in existence. So they are running a buy 2, get 1 half off of every kind of absolute omnibus that they have like in back stock right now. So get some good deals. But while you're getting those good deals, use that code MarvelGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. And use it a limited amount of times, and we want to thank them for being our official sponsor. All right, so, Brent, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the first film of Phase 5 with the MCU. We're going to do non-spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, we'll talk a few minutes about our non-spoiler thoughts, and then if you haven't seen the movie, pause, go see the movie, or if you don't care about spoilers, well, we're going to get ready to spoil the heck out of this movie. So, Brent, what are your non-spoiler thoughts?
Overall, for me, this movie kind of comes down more in the middle quality-wise. It's not I don't think it's the dumpster fire that people online might have you believe. It's certainly also not the best thing the MCU has ever put out. It is somewhere in the middle. Where exactly in the middle, I guess we'll find out at the end when we rank them. But there's a lot in this movie that I really, really enjoy. There's a lot in this movie that is just kind of there. There really is. I don't really have big, huge negatives. Maybe a couple nitpicky things, but there's just stuff that it just didn't move the needle in a positive direction. Like, it wasn't bad. It was just kind of okay, right? But there's also, again, just to reiterate, there is a lot in this movie that is fun to watch. Is it laugh out loud, belly laugh funny? No, not to me anyway, but it was chuckle worthy. You know, I definitely chuckled more than once, and there's a couple good jokes in there as well. And definitely know which part, and we'll bring it up, had the absolute biggest laugh from me. But it overall, honestly, for me, it's kind of in line with the other Ant-Man movies. I like them. They're serviceable. I think I think it's rewatchable. It's also not, topping my list of favorite movies I've seen.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting where it's, I think you kind of said it like there with Ant-Man, that it is, it's just in line with where it is. They're trying to position it that it is, I don't know. I enjoyed a lot of part of this. I think a lot of people, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit later on, that some people's speculation became their expectation with this movie, and we're expecting a lot more than basically they thought what they were going to get, if that makes any sense. But, I think when they keep on, and people would say keep on putting out the promotions to have the Kang being introduced into this, starting off the big multiverse saga and bringing in exactly what's moving forward with the MCU. I can understand where they do that, but I think one of the big highlights is Kang. Kang is definitely one of the big highlights. Jonathan Majors definitely met my expectations and even exceeded them at that point. Some of the growth of some of the cast members some was better than others. Some people look like they were kind of left by the sidelines at that point. But I think you said it best. Like, this was a okay, borderline, okay, leaning towards good movie, but wasn't necessarily one I will be saying, oh my gosh, you have to see it. Like, it is one of those, like, you definitely are just gonna, like, it's like end game level. And it's not necessarily end game level. It's a setup. It's setting up for what the rest of the Phase 5 and Phase 6 are going to be about.
Yeah, you definitely called out Kang there. I don't want to go too deep into the actual characters, but I will just say, I had told a friend of mine that for me, going into this movie, there was like one major goal that I felt like this movie, to me, that this movie had. And just to be clear, that's my goal. Like, I didn't hear Peyton Reed say this. I didn't hear Kevin Feige or any of the other producers say this. And that goal that I felt like this movie had was introduce Kang, establish Kang. And even I know people who watch it all are thinking, well, they did that in Loki. Yes, on a smaller scale. But the TV shows are not watched as wide of an audience as they are with the movies. Do it on a larger scale. I think, as far as that's concerned, mission accomplished.
Yeah, and where you get some more of the backstory. Like, I know, like you said, like not everyone does watch the shows. I think they did a good job of kind of bringing people up to speed on why Kang is going to be this formidable force in the MCU, making sure that it is, Kang is going to be a fearsome foe, and it's, it is an interesting one. I hope it meets the expectations of what everyone's doing.
Yeah, and it certainly hasn't met everyone's expectations, and I'm seeing some criticisms for the movie that I don't think hold water, such as there's no stakes, right? I would argue that there are very significant stakes throughout the movie, and they're to varying different degrees, but usually when people say there's no stakes, they want to see like cities getting destroyed, everybody, world-ending events, and I'm like, not every movie is about that kind of stakes. For example, just, to keep us non-spoiler, in the first Ant-Man movie, one of the big stakes was simply Scott, being able to see his daughter, to get back in his wife's good graces, to see his daughters. And like, that was kind of the stakes for most of the movie up until his daughter's life was endangered. But, when Yellow Jacket goes into a room at the very end there, but like, that was the stakes of the movie. And I think that's okay, no pun intended, for some of these movies to have a smaller scale along the stakes. We don't need them all to be world ending events.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is kind of an interesting one where you say, like, going a world-spanning, like, event at that point. It's more of just, like, the threat of Kang going into the multiverse at that point, instead of, like, the world itself being at stake. We don't, like, Kang, makes some threats here and there, but it's just the threat of Kang going in there versus what's there at that point. So, but, yeah, again, it's going to be interesting, especially when we get towards the end of the movie, especially with those post credits, about what our theories are about what's going to be happening with what's going to happen with Kang and the rest of the multiverse saga at this point. So, but any last minute non-spoiler thoughts before we move on to spoilers?
No, let's go ahead and move on, because I can feel me dancing around it, and I'm done with it. Let's move on. So, go see the movie if you haven't seen it yet. Pause here and come back after you've seen the movie. The download will still be waiting for you.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, all right. So we're gonna get into non-spoiler thoughts, but we're gonna take that ad break first to break at that point. So, as you know, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on in the Geek Ultimate Alliance network. We don't get to choose what ads come on. They can be a bit loud, so give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. So, all right. So, as we always do, we're going to break this down into acts. So, we're starting with Act 1. Start at the beginning. It is. I was wondering how they were going to start this off with, and one of the things I'm kind of happy about is, when we were breaking down the trailers, one of my theories was where we saw the scene of what looked like stars shooting across the sky. One of my theories was like, what if this is Kang crash landing into the quantum realm? And it ended up being true, but I like that we keep on revisiting Janet discovering him. And I like that is how we begin this whole journey, is their first meeting.
Yeah, I thought that was a great way to open it, just to kind of remind us, Janet has some serious time in the quantum realm. She's down there, she's just going about her life, and she sees Kang's ship crash down, and just goes to investigate it, right? And then she ends up getting in a little skirmish herself with some sort of quantum realm creature, and then Kang actually saves her life. So I thought that was a great way to open. He just comes up and he says something like, "Where are we?" or "What is this place?" And that's our introduction to Kang.
Yeah, and we start off, we get to the title sequence at that point, and then we kind of get how the trailers have been were opening with basically Scott's and Hope's life post Endgame, in getting kind of the update of where we see, Scott being looked at as this hero and, save the world. Everyone's kind of like, hey, you're Ant-Man. Can I get a picture? This whole kind of thing is, can you get a picture with my dog? I kind of missed what that was really about.
The dog thing, that got a little like chuckle out of me, like that level. Like, it was kind of funny. I think to me it was just to show that, like, Ant-Man is kind of put on a pedestal by people around him, but they don't entirely know who they're putting on that pedestal. Like, they know it's somebody important. They don't entirely know who it is, So I was like, let's just do the whole picture thing with the dog. Someone probably did it once and it went viral, so other people are doing it. Or the guy in, like, the coffee shop who calls him Spider-Man. He doesn't know who he is. He just knows he's somebody.
Yeah, he's a hero at that point. I did like seeing, Hope taking over Pym Industries at that point, and kind of taking the Pym particles, the fear that Hank had about, like, them falling in the wrong hands or them putting it out there at that point. She found a way to make them be useful for the world, and has changed life on the planet as we know it. Now, we kind of got, like, hints and hints about what she's exactly doing, but we never really found out like exactly what, like all the different things outside of maybe when they were in, they went back to later in the home and you saw the basically the small pizza and then poof, it's ready.
And that's an example of like the escalation of the PEM particle and like the continued work that Hank is clearly still doing on it. Like there's a couple other of them in this movie, but like the way that they use the tech in Ant-Man 1 through now has definitely escalated. Like he's using it more, just more cautiously, like not cautious at all. I know in the second movie, like he had his basically a little case full of Hot Wheel toys is what it looked like, and then became a bunch of different full-size cars for him. But the tech is clearly evolving. There's a few things in this movie that continue to show that. And the first one is, yes, he drops something on a piece of pizza, drops this little liquid on the piece of pizza, and it just, he saves $8 that way, and it expands.
Yeah, exactly. And I like seeing, again, we see the relationship of Hope and Scott still being there at that point, where they, he comes into her work and they basically get in their costumes and they go to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge and have a beer and just be with each other at that point.
Sure. It was a little corny, like when they put those costumes on, he goes to her office and she just looks at him, smiles goofy, and like hits a button and the costume appears. I'm fine with that, by the way. Like, yes, it's also, this is another example, the way their costumes can just come out of this button, not unlike the arc reactor that Tony used in Infinity War and Endgame, or in Infinity War, I should say. It's come a long way from him having to put on the motorcycle suit that he found in the basement of Ant-Man 1.
Mm-hmm. And, we get him doing a book talk as well at that point and promoting his book. What is it? Looking Out for the Little Guy.
I have ordered this book. Listener Jim Scroggs sent me a link to it, and about 30 seconds later, that book was ordered and should arrive. I think it's in September.
Now, my question is, did they actually put out an audio version where he reads it?
I don't know, but I'm going to find out, because when I showed it to my wife later that night, the first thing she said to me was, I hope there's an audiobook, because she likes audiobooks. So.
Exactly. Especially since we heard him listening to it later at that point, listening to himself read the book.
Yeah, it tries to claim it's the radio, but no, he's just, and that was a funny scene, like getting little glimpses of the book about like, is he Hulk's baby now? Because Hulk turned him into a baby, or he's met a talking raccoon. Like, I did enjoy those little anecdotes.
And, it's just a 180 from where he's come from, being the former criminal, not necessarily having anything positive in his life, now becoming like one of the most famous people in the world, saving the world. Like, one can say, yeah, he's cashing in on the fame. He's enjoying it. He's first time kind of being happy. But it's interesting in the sense of at what cost, Yeah,
you're right. He is basically taking it easy, and he is coasting on the fact that he helped to save the universe, which, sure, big deal, but I like the way that the family just kind of was giving him grief over that, because, oh yeah, did you hear? I didn't know you did that. You should write a book about it, Janet says. Fun story. But at the whole time, Cassie is pushing him to do more, saying, yeah, you did that and it was great, but you can't stop. You still have to help people. That's what we do. And she has showed that, and I believe that's something we talked about, where she was possibly in jail for something as a result of her helping or protesting and things like that. And sure enough, that's what it was. She references peaceful protesting and a homeless encampment for people who were displaced by the blip being broken up, and she was a part of that. And I kind of like seeing Cassie go that direction.
Yeah, and it's kind of reminiscent of what Scott happened when he got put in jail for, when we found out why he's in jail for it. He didn't like what was going on at the firm he was working at and did some things in order to kind of fight against it and got put in jail for it.
He was a whistleblower. He did some Robin Hood. He basically quite literally robbed from the rich to give to the poor. Cassie is just following in her father's footsteps.
And I just love it that he thinks this is like the first time she's been in prison, or put in jail, not prison, but finds out at the dinner table is like, oh, it's been a number of times.
It was the second time, yeah. And then you find out later when they're put in prison by Kang, or in jail by Kang, well, that's number 3 for her and number 4 for him. While we're talking about her, what did you think about Catherine Newton, who took over for Oh my gosh, her name's escaping me. But she was recast for this character. She's not the one who played Cassie in Avengers Endgame, and I'm going to confirm who that is real quick.
Yeah, I thought Catherine Newton did a good job, considering that the actress that played the older Cassie, 5 years later from where we left off in Infinity War, technically Ant-Man and the Wasp, we didn't get much out of her in Endgame, so it's not like I was really missing anything. I feel bad for the actress that was originally that thought she was going to be continuing on.
Emma Furman, who apparently found out when they announced it at San Diego Comic-Con that Catherine Newton would be playing it. I'm like, oh, yeah, dude, Feige, you got to pick up the phone first, man. Come on.
Yeah, not good form.
I thought Catherine Newton was a high point. Definitely a highlight of this movie. She was very charming. She was just like a fun character. I question just because I just question everything because why they recast, and I tried looking it up last night to see like what exactly did anything ever come out, and the only thing I could find was the implication that they wanted a more seasoned actress, and Catherine Newton has been in a number of other projects. I guess that's just because they wanted her to be they knew she was going to have a larger role in this movie, and presumably going forward, I imagine she will continue in some sort of Young Avengers type thing. That said, you're right. Like Emma Furman, she was only Cassie for like 3 minutes, like of real screen time, and I don't even know if it was that long. So it was just barely there. Not a huge deal. Recasting happens. I was like, I wonder why. Like I just why. But Catherine Newton, welcome to the MCU. I thought she did a great job.
Well, I mean, I think you said it best. It's just like not knocking the prior actress by any stretch of the imagination. When it comes to this is a business. And business sells, and if you're trying to get people who are fans of her as her star is rising, this gets more people into the seats and saying, hey, I like her in this movie, we're going to go. So, I mean, it makes sense. She was good. I look forward to seeing more of her. I don't think, she was good and okay at points, but when I can't expect her to be like, oh, you're not Jonathan. I can't compare her to Jonathan Majors. That's not the part she's playing. She's playing the daughter of Scott Lang. So I think she did a good job with what was given to her. I think there were some cringe-worthy lines in the sense of like, some of the lines that were given to her for certain things, just like, I'm not a fan of that. And it's not her, it's the lines that were written for her.
Okay, that's fair.
So I'll kind of get into that where we did that, but yeah. Good. I look forward to seeing more of her. Let's bring on Champions and Young Avengers with her, please. But Hines brings up something that I wanted to bring up. So quit reading my mind, Travis. At that point, Janet reluctance to share anything about the quantum realm. Not Hope presses her. Everyone's trying to get some more of her, and she just doesn't want to do it. But then we go to the post-credit scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Scott's going into the quantum realm, and she has absolutely no problem with that necessarily. So I wonder, it could be one of those retcons that we just aren't supposed to question, but it did like saying, well, I mean, I get it, but, obviously we didn't think ahead on this one.
Yeah, Clay touched on what the real answer is just simply they had not written the story for Quantumania when Ant-Man and the Wasp came out, when did that come out? 2018? It's now 2023. Like, they didn't have the story yet. They may have had, like, the basic idea, but they clearly didn't have the specifics. In story, I'll just headcanon it away as Scott was only supposed to go in there long enough to, like, collect some samples and get right back. He was only going to be there for a few seconds. They weren't trying to, like, send a full-fledged signal down to the surface. He wasn't even supposed to go all the way down to the surface. He didn't go as deep into the quantum realm as they did in this movie. In fact, Hank even references, it didn't look like this, and she says something to the effect of, well, you didn't get this far. You didn't go this far. So, yes, I believe it is an inconsistency. I can headcanon it away that way, so it's not going to bother me.
I mean, it's very good, and I can definitely get on board with that at that point. So we get to finding out that Cassie, basically has been designed a quantum realm device that she's been working on during the time in the blip. And what she is basically a signal into the quantum realm to kind of check on people who's down there if, helping people. Like she says, we still got to help people. You can't, like, again, pushing on Scott saying, your Ant-Man is not just for appearances and to make money and things like that, but you have the ability to continue to help people. Your Hope is helping people. What are you doing at that point? But when, it's interesting just because of like, she is obviously proving how smart she is and that she can understand this stuff, and Hank's working with her on it. Hank's agreeing with this, but the minute Janet sees that, wait a minute, you designed something to send a signal down to the quantum realm, and they kind of just, I love the MacGuffin of like, oh, the ant farm and something like that. It's like, oh, that's not going to come back later on. But just her genuine fear, so much so that when they activate it, she's like, no, turn it off, get it, and she just rips it out at that point. I was like, well, we know where this is going. It's obviously not going to work as much, but it's just like, I get why. I totally understand again with PTSD, with Janet not just wanting to talk about it just because of that, what happened down there, what we don't know. She doesn't want to talk about it, but it gets to a point where everyone's like, we wouldn't have done this stuff. We wouldn't have done anything if you had opened up. And that's easier to say when you haven't gone through it. So again, I get two sides of it, of what's going on. And she does very well. I think Michelle Pfeiffer does an outstanding job. And I love the amount of growth they gave. I mean, she got a lot of screen time to build up her character in this movie. And I think these beginnings of it were really a force for her.
It's one of those things where, like, if they had just had a conversation, like, the whole plot of the movie doesn't work, right? Like,
sure, exactly, yeah.
And I get it. I get it from Janet's perspective of why she wouldn't talk about it. I mean, she's effectively, she went through a very severe trauma for 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. And she's only been out at most for a couple years, depending on where exactly they place this on the timeline. I get why she wouldn't talk about it. What I don't get, and I get why Cassie would go behind Scott's back to work on this stuff, because obviously Scott would have reservations he showed, she did the whole thing about shrinking the cop car, and he just got mad even about that. Like, he's not going to want her anywhere near. What I don't get and don't excuse is Hank and Hope encouraging Cassie and going behind their backs, not just Scott's back, but also Janet's back. Because while Janet may not have been willing to talk about it, they could have and should have said to her, we're sending a signal down to the quantum realm, right? Like, they should have told her what they were doing. And so I do think that was a bit of an issue there. That said, I'm not going to say it's like inconsistent or anything with their characters. In fact, I would argue it's consistent that they did act that way. If you go back and look, especially at Hank's behavior throughout, he's been very secretive with his family and stuff the entire time we've known the character. And so it's definitely not out of character. I'm like, come on, have a little bit more respect for your family. And let's go ahead and mention here, because we're talking about these scenes, I found it a little odd the way that Cassie referred to Hank as grandpa. Because, like, I get the attachment to Hope, because she's going to remember that, and they talk about this in Ant-Man and the Wasp, multiple times it comes up, that Scott and Hope were partners. And she's going to remember that, know what that means. And she basically grew up with having in her head that this was her mom has remarried and Hope is her dad's new partner. So, like, I get the attachment to there, and that could simply be enough to call grandpa, but it's like, they're not married, they're not engaged, all of them were snapped, everybody was gone, so it's not like she had time to develop a relationship with them, while Hope was snapped, because Hank and Janet were also snapped. It seemed it's such a small thing. Both times I watched the movie, I'm like, that's a weird choice.
Yeah, and especially, again, promoting that Cassie was able to figure stuff out to try to design this during the blip without just basically looking at the research and things like that. I mean, again, trying to promote her intelligence at that point as well. I like what they're putting her up for, is that she may come off as a little bit, again, she's, I don't know, how old is she supposed to be in this movie?
I think 17ish or whatever.
Okay.
The actress is like mid-20s, so okay.
Standard.
Yes, like exactly standard. They did the 90210 thing with her, but that is standard at this point. It's not often they get an actual teenage actor or actress to play someone in that age range. Every now and then they do, but not usually. So normal. And she looks younger than she really is, so that kind of helps.
Yeah, and especially, again, like you bring up, like going behind Janet's back, and sending that signal down, like science is about risk. Science is about taking risks at that point. But seeing how fearful she is and how reluctant she is doing it, doing anything without kind of a full understanding with I don't know. It's one of those things where you want to take that risk, but you also don't want to make sure that I don't know, you want to go down that path to understand what's going on in the quantum realm, but if she's not going to help, then she's just a hindrance to their progress.
Yeah, and I would agree with all that. But again, all of that said, I liked our new Cassie. I thought she was good. Michelle Pfeiffer, she was given some stuff to do in this one. In Endgame, I don't even think she had a line. She was just literally there. And in Ant-Man and the Wasp, glorified cameo, she had maybe 3 lines. They actually gave her stuff to do in this, and I think she did a really good job for it.
Yes, definitely. So send the she unplugs it. You get basically a signal back from the quantum realm, which we're assuming is Kang at that point, and basically sucks them all in. What did you think about the visual effects of them, basically kind of the shrinking effects as they go into it? I thought that was pretty strong.
Yeah, I like that whole sequence. I thought that was really cool visually. Again, I just feel so nitpicky because why did it take Scott so long to put his suit on during that time, right? The second they were going, that suit should have been on. Now Hope did it, her parents get sucked into it. She looks at Scott and basically, without words says, I'm going after him, flips on the Wasp suit and goes. Really cool moment. Why didn't Cassie put hers on? She had one with her. She clearly had it with her, and they'd already referenced her having a suit. They had already told you she has one. And not at all surprised that Hank and Hope would have built her one, right? No shock there whatsoever, especially with everything else we talked about. But those nitpicks aside, the sequence was cool. It was cool to see Janet and Hank and Hope go in, and then Scott and Cassie go in later. Okay, granted, I guess I thought of this the second time. Hope should not have known that Scott and Cassie were in there because they were in there before Scott and Cassie were. They were behind, so that they should not have known. Scott and Cassie also got sucked in. Maybe they just assumed it. But then you see the little ants and stuff go in there, and it's oh, that's going to come back. That's going to come back at some point to get you. So it was, I thought it was a cool visual sequence, and there are several really neat visual sequences in this, and I would just say this was the first one.
Yeah, and, again, they all basically disappear, and they all end up, one could say a tire trope. They basically get split up. Hope, Janet, and Hank end up in a kind of forest, we'll call it the forest part of the wherever they are in the quantum realm, while Scott and Cassie are in another area. And I do like how Scott very much has learned a lot since his time going for the first time he went Giant Man, and now can basically go on it on a whim without necessarily kind of gearing up for it. He has learned a lot in this time.
He definitely has. And, they showed him doing it a little more comfortably in the second movie, but he's clearly progressing, right? And he, as Ant-Man, as a superhero, he is actively getting better, and it's in a way that we can really see, the development from him, even though, for the most part, his powers remain the same, go really small or go really big. It is nice to see him use it more.
Yeah, and Clay brings something up in the chat saying the volume backgrounds made this entire movie look and feel like Revenge of the Sith.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, but I actually, I've seen some criticism for that, and I get it. If the volume is something that bugs you, that's fine. I think the volume looks way better than traditional green screens. I like it. So let's be real. It's not like they can go to the quantum realm. So they can't exactly shoot on location. They obviously do still have sets that they build in the volume. That's how it works. You have the background, but they still have to have the sets. I thought, for the most part, maybe I could find... I don't know. I could probably, if I rewatch the movie a third time, which I intend to because I need to go see it with my dad, I could probably find something in the background that bugs me. But honestly, I got nothing right now that I can tell you. I thought it looked good.
Yeah, no. I mean, we'll get into some parts where it get a little dicey at that point. But I like how with Scott and Cassie, they basically get found by, Scott and Cassie get found by the rebels at that point, the rebellion against Kang that we later find out. But Hope, Janet, and Hank avoid one of Kang's scouts, and then Janet. I love it how Janet says, "Hey, I'm going to take the lead in meeting these kind of, I don't know what we want to call them, wastelanders, whatever we call it, because they're definitely not they're definitely not the rebels.
They're definitely not with the rebels. I don't know what they are. Scavengers, maybe. I don't really have a good reason to think that, but it was a cool sequence with, like them on their, whatever kind of bike things they had going around. And then Janet showing she's got some moves and, stealing that guy's knife and stabbing him with it. Like,
yeah.
She's got some game.
Exactly. And how she does it says, hey, I know things down here. It's going to be, and that brings us to, one of Phil's comment, and welcome to the chat, Phil. Having Janet take the reins was a nice reversal from having things being rooted in Hank's past for the last two films. Yes, and it makes the most sense. It puts her front and center, that even if she's dealt with a lot of trauma by being down here, she knows she can turn it on in the sense of saying, hey, if we're going to get out of here, I've got to use my knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think Phil makes a great point there. The last two movies have largely been about fathers and daughters, and in this one they mix it up a little bit, and we get a lot more from Janet. And Michael Douglas, he clearly took a step back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think I'm not saying, and I won't claim that he phoned it in or anything. I think his performance was fine. I do think they just didn't ask him to do very much compared to the last two movies, whereas Michelle Pfeiffer, she was asked to do quite a bit.
Yeah, and that brings me to another person that we're basically not going to see a lot of until towards kind of the end of the movie is Hope, and you get a little bit of her in the beginning. She kind of disappears in the background
Hope? Was she in this? Was she in this movie? Hope was in this movie.
Yeah, and it's one of those, especially when we talk about preview for you patrons. We talk about one of the big things after Edgar Wright leaves Ant-Man for creative differences. She had a lot of input of basically punching up her character's role in the first Ant-Man. In this one, it almost seems like she took a really big step backwards in the amount of her role in this.
Okay. Before I say what I'm going to say, I have to.
Okay.
I want to acknowledge she had a couple, if nothing else, cool hero moments, right?
Yes,
like
she
that
did.
moment when she came out of the portal to stop Kang at the very end there. Like, for example, that one, a couple other cool hero moments in the fights, in the actions. Like, she's been great in all three movies. I listened to the Happy Sad Confused podcast today with Evangeline.
I did too.
And that's funny because we didn't talk about this before.
Nope.
She makes a reference to having more input on her character in this movie than any other movie so far in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm like, were all of your notes just that you want to have less? Like, were you busy? You had less shoot days? Like, again, I don't mean to. The story wasn't really. Arguably, it wasn't about her. It was about Janet, and it was about Janet and really Cassie to an extent. Like, they were the two ones I felt like the story revolved around the most. It wasn't about her, but she is one of the main characters of the Ant-Man franchise, and I felt like they just didn't use her for anything. Like, she basically made a convenient person to help out in the fight scenes for the Pims, for Hank, for Janet, because she could fly, she could, had her little stinger blast or whatever, but she didn't do that much. And I'm like, what? Like, she just didn't do much in this movie.
Yeah, and that was confusing too when I heard that. I was like, but she also makes comments like, it's one thing for when you're actually filming the movie for it to be listened to. It's a completely separate process for editing. So she kind of hints at that, like she may have had. I don't know how much of her role was left on the cutting room floor. I don't know. Maybe we'll see it at that point, and she's not necessarily, she's out there promoting the movie and this, that, and the other. But it's just like, yeah, you're right. I'm trying to think of, like, I would have liked to have seen more of her, but when the movie, what we were given, maybe, just like Scott is trying to reconnect with Cassie and make up for lost time, we see her in the beginning trying to be back with her mom, who she hasn't seen in 30 plus years. It's a tough line because when Janet wasn't sharing, she doesn't want to, like, push. I don't know, after she finally opens up as we get into Act 2, what more we would have liked to have seen of Hope,
Sure. All in the game says her using the Pym tech to help the world could have done with a little exploration. I would probably agree. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting idea. They certainly did a case of tell, don't show in this. You know, they just told you all these great things she's doing with Pym tech or Pym Van Dyne tech, I think it was now called. But this movie had a tight runtime, you know, just over 2 hours long. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, like I felt like they did quite a bit in the movie. I didn't feel like it was super, super quick or anything like that, but they spend like no time on Earth proper, you know, like I know the whole thing's on Earth, but like they spend no real time like in San Francisco. They're only there for 5-10 minutes and they're off in the quantum realm. And then you get another 5 minutes or so at the end of the movie. So as is, they didn't have time to show that stuff, but I would have been interested to have seen it.
Yeah. Before we head into Act 2 and take our next ad break, I want to mention what Clay's had as we get into more of the CG as we delve in the quantum realm. Says, I think that they just may have used and relied on CGI sets too much. Wish the story had a little more on Earth plane instead of spending 98% of the film in the quantum realm. My pushback to that is just what the basis of this whole movie is Kang in the quantum realm and diving into the quantum realm. It is one of those things that it's a victim of its own circumstance. Now, could the CG been improved? Could they spend a little more time punching things up a little bit? Yes, I can be fully agree with a number of different points in the movie at that point. However, when you're basically dealing with how it is like a reality that doesn't exist at that point, I think it was just what we're looking for. You know, what the movie is about is looking at what this new world looks like. It is a universe separate from ours. It is completely separate. So you have to rely on the CG, whether you like it or not. That's what the movie is about. And that's, you know, could they have improved it a little bit? But I'll push back just on a little bit that I wasn't thinking or hoping for more on the plane of like Earth 616. I was expecting and got a lot in the quantum realm.
I would co-sign all of that. I think the trailers told us exactly what to expect from there, you know, because you get most of the Earth scenes in the trailers, across the trailers and TV spots. And so because of that, it's going to have to look very CGI volume heavy. Like it's gonna have to. They can't do it. There's really no other way to do it. And I know some people it's like, oh, they should have had puppets and stuff for the aliens instead of CGI. I'm like, you know what? I disagree because I think that kind of thing was charming back when that was the best option. But I don't think it's the best option anymore. And I want them to do this kind of thing. I like the Fantastic Four coming. Do we never want to see the Negative Zone, for example, right?
Oh God, we had to.
And to me, like, this is the way to do it. So if the choice was a third movie that's based around a heist, which I know they claimed this one had a heist, but really it was only 5 minutes, another heist movie, and then just set it in San Francisco and stuff like that. Or, you know, swing for the fences and go big. And maybe they didn't get there, and clearly they didn't because I've got my negatives about the movie, but they tried, and I really do think, as far as the looks of the environment and stuff go, visually it was very interesting to look at. It was super compelling. Lots of cool creatures to look at, and not just the broccoli guy, but all these different things and animals and plants and stuff just floating around there. And I liked all that. I thought that stuff was cool about it, and I'm looking forward to getting to revisit this movie even at home. So maybe, you know, you can pause on a couple scenes and get a better look at some stuff. So I get the complaint of too much of CGI sets and stuff. To me, like that, I don't know. I get the complaint, but I can't go along with you.
Well, the other thing is, and again, it's a difference between Scott Lang versus Hank Pym. In the comics, again, when Ant-Man was introduced, Tales to Astonish, it was about delving into the weird and strange sci-fi elements of what Ant-Man could do, going into these weird pocket universes, these monsters that you can't even see, getting down to these microverses and all these little things that we can't see, and kind of the scary horror sci-fi elements. This movie was more comic accurate for what Ant-Man originally is about than, you know, where we get with when Scott Lang's introduced into the comics.
Yeah, and I don't know. I like Scott Lang more than Hank Pym. You know, I've talked about.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fine. I'm just kind of.
it fits. Like, to me, it fit, and I didn't want just another small scale. Pun intended, not intended. Pun accepted. How about that? Pun accepted. I didn't want just another small scale. Like, to me, even though they quite literally shrunk even smaller than they had before going into the quantum realm, it's a bigger movie. To me, this is a bigger movie than the last two, and maybe they didn't quite hit all the high points they could have. Maybe this could have been better about the movie, or that could have been better about the movie, but I'm still glad they went for it.
Oh yeah, exactly. So do you have any more about Act 1 before we head into Act 2?
No, I think we're good to move on.
Okay, so we're going to take our next ad break before we head into the next act, where we start kind of some big revelations coming up and get our introduction to Kang the Conqueror. So, listeners, as you know, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and we could be a bit loud, so give it that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. So Scott and Cassie are with the rebels and drink some goo, which, here's the thing. Again, I'll say this over and over again. This is an Ant-Man movie. They're going to land on, they've established some of that kind of the humor you're going to get with the Ant-Man movie. It's not like where people complain like, oh, we had Thor for these kind of movies, and then we had a big change with Taika. Ant-Man's been self-aware about what it is at that point. So this whole kind of joking, drink the goo, and then all of a sudden he has this, drink the goo, and he becomes kind of a universal translator. And it's kind of like this, again, man in a different realm, all these kind of weird creatures and things like that. But I like, it's almost very interesting that Cassie has not been anywhere in the quantum realm, and she kind of takes it in stride. I'm kind of like saying, well, that's kind of progressive for you. You're not you're freaked out, but you're more just like, all right, they're not killing us yet, so let me just kind of go with this.
Well, you got to look at how she grew up, right? Mm-hmm. As she says in this movie, a guy in a bumblebee costume tried to kill her in her bedroom when she was 6 years old.
True. So she's been little, yeah.
She's been exposed to bigger and crazier and wackier things, and having lived with Scott and the way they established his involvement in saving the universe, she's heard the stories that he went through.
I'll take it back. She has had a pet ant as well. So
she did have a pet ant. You're right. I forgot about the pet ant. The goo stuff. Veb, the goo, the creature with the goob who was obsessed over people's holes, was played by David Dastmalchian, and I actually forgot that he was going to be in this movie as a different character. So hey, that's cool. As soon as I saw that some of it had run down Cassie's chin, I'm like, oh, this is a translator, because she's saying drink the goo. He'll drink it and he'll be able to get along, to understand. But I really enjoyed the way they did this. Both 2 times we see the goo get drunk, whatever, to enable the translation feature, right?
Yeah.
2 times they do it. They do it later with Hank and with Hope. I really liked both times doing it, because you're hearing all this other chatter and noise, and it's this alien language. You don't understand it. And as the person in question of both scenes drink it, it starts to focus in and gets clearer to the point where you understand what they're saying. And so it's like, yeah, like I knew that's what it was going to be from the second Cassie had it dribbling down her chin, but I still thought it was cleverly done. And I liked it more than them just saying, here, put this universal translator in your ear and let's move on.
Yeah, and we meet Quaz, who is played by William Jackson Harper, who is a telepath, and also and he is played by, you and I are both a big fan of the show The Good Place, so playing
underused though, right?
Yes,
just underused. Like they could have done. I wish he wasn't this character so they could use him in somewhere else in the MCU. There was fan casting for him for Reed Richards. I would have taken it. Like that would have been fine.
Yeah.
I wish they had saved such a great actor for a bigger part down the line. Who knows? Maybe we'll see Quaz again. But right now, I'd be surprised if we did.
Yeah, it's somewhat forgettable. Again, just another rebel leader. Just we get the rebel leader, Gentora, that's there as well, and. They have some discussions back and forth, but when Scott says Janet's name, and she's like, stops, like, why did you say that? Who, why are you saying Janet? Like, how do you know Janet at that point? And I don't think I've only seen it once, you've seen it twice. When that happened, my first thought is, I didn't think they looked at Janet as a positive figure. You know what I mean?
I agree. And I think basically, having seen it, like the impression I get is Janet blames herself for Kang coming back to power, right? Which she should. She enabled it, basically. I think somehow that story has gotten out there. People know that Janet was involved in Kang rising to power, and Kang did what Kang does, and he conquered. And so no, people, maybe they're not instantly killing her, and they don't instantly hate her and stuff, but because we saw multiple pleasant interactions with her and people. But clearly, at least the rebels, Jintara and such, they just, I don't know, they don't like her. Jintara is played by Katie O'Brien. The whole time I'm watching the movie last night, I can't figure out why I recognize her. Right?
I hate when that happens.
I did what any civilized person would do, and I looked it up later. She has been in like a million things that I've seen, just never as like the main character. Like she was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she was in Mandalorian, she was in Black Lightning, she was in Walking Dead. Like she's been in all these different shows that I have seen, and several others that I didn't mention. I'm like, well, you're just one of those people, and that's why I recognize you, because I have seen you.
You're
like
that girl.
Times. Yes. So and she was fine. She didn't have a ton to do, but I thought what she was given to do, I thought she did fine with. It was bugging me the whole movie. Every time she was on scene, who is this girl?
Yeah. So we flash to Hope, Janet, and Hank. They've caught their ride, and they're going to this kind of like city or like, settlement, whatever you want to call it, and end up meeting Lord Kryler, played by Bill Murray, and a quote-unquote former ally / lover to Janet at that point. That was kind of interesting, finding out, again, you were gone for 30 years. Hank needed to be with someone for 30 years.
They've got needs, they've got needs.
Yep. Who reveals that things changed since she left. And, Kryler's not necessarily working against Kang. He is basically biding time and is working for Kang and biding time so that Kang's forces can take them hostage at that point. But they are basically, as soon as Kang's forces come in there, they're able to escape at that point. But it's I've seen enough people make fun of Hope's lines in there, basically calling Kryler a liar. My mom's a hero. At that point, it's like,
yeah,
again, not the best lines there. It's going to come off very meme worthy later on. Lord Kryler, Bill Murray playing it. Okay, again, serviceable. Nothing brought to the part. It's a comic part. Introduced and died in the same comic it was introduced in. So I don't think. However, people are saying Kryler died. No, he did not. If you really pay attention, the Beast does throw him off to the side.
Yeah, so he presumably survived it. Kryler, I felt he didn't add anything. There was a fun action sequence on when Hank made that little squid thing blow up all big, so Kryler had just eaten one of those and now it can eat him. Like, that was funny. But I felt like it was a diversion and a waste of a few minutes of time in an already short film, and we just didn't need to. I just don't think it added anything to it. It just didn't. To me, it didn't add anything because all he really accomplished was getting them his ship. Mm-hmm. But because they stole his ship. But that earlier group that they also got a ride from, this was just on a creature. That group could have provided the ship, and you could have skipped him entirely.
Exactly. But again, it was just one of those okay, Scott and Cassie have their moment with the rebels. Okay, we've got to give Hope, Janet, and Hank that kind of moment separately in a different kind of upper class bar, kind of learning a little bit more about Janet's past.
It was kind of funny when Hank said, "I don't know your customs, but do you have something that can get me drunk?" All right, I'll give you that one. That's a good line.
Yeah, and we start seeing Hank's hearing aids is picking up things, and it's kind of bothering him, but he's not really connecting. And I like how they keep on revisiting. We'll get the payoff later on. But when it started doing it, this was the second time we were doing this. Okay, something's going on. This isn't just why would they put that in there just because,
And I had chalked that up to him trying to get in contact with Scott. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought he was trying to do. And clearly I was wrong, but.
And so when we flash back to the rebels camp at that point. Well, guess what? They come under force. Kang's forces come in and start taking the rebels out, and then we get the introduction of MODOK. And you know what? People say, I've had so many people come to me and said, man, MODOK looks silly, ridiculous. It looks so weird. It's definitely. Guess what? That's MODOK. MODOK is supposed to be this weird, annoying villain. And I guess what? They did it. It may not be the MODOK you may have wanted, but I think they did a great job putting in Darren Cross, the revelation, especially when he takes off the mask. And Darren, I love everyone's reactions. Darren? What happened to you?
MODOK looked terrible. He was dumb. He was ridiculous. He had totally cringe-worthy dialogue. Mm-hmm. So he was perfect. That is MODOK. Yeah. Yes. That is MODOK. He was perfect. He did look really bad. I challenge you to find a picture where he doesn't look really bad. I have always thought that MODOK just looks so dumb. And I've also always thought, well, that's kind of the purpose. That doesn't mean sometimes he doesn't come across as creepy or whatever. Sure, he can. He can, change things a little bit. But more often than not, I see him as just dumb, and he's often henchman level person. I know, sure, he leads AIM sometimes, but if he's around other supervillains, he's never the one in charge, right? He's not your Kang. He's not your Red Skull. He's not your Dr. Octopus in the Sinister Six or your Norman Osborn. No, he's just freaking MODOK. And I get why people don't like him. I get it, but I don't know. I'm like that. I thought he was perfect. That's what MODOK should have been. I thought he was perfect. And you know what? I'm glad I guess they could have showed us his face a little less. We'll talk about the face showing, and we'll add that in. They could have showed us his face a little less and gone with the armored Iron Man looking helmet suit that I mentioned before. I think does look better. But they still, I thought they nailed him.
Yeah, and was I expecting to see MODOK's naked butt as we see how he got transformed? No. But I tell you what, the audience I was in when I saw my showing yesterday was that got a pretty good laugh because I think it was more of just, we're seeing this, we're going there.
Yep,
okay.
Yep, there we are, little MODOK bottom. Yep.
And again, this is again he's angry. He says, "Look at me! Look at what you did! Come to me!" He's supposed to be annoying. He's supposed to be the little henchman of Kang. You see how when we get Kang and he's trying to cut in on Kang, Kang puts him off to the side. Don't know. You know your role. You shut your mouth now. You be the good little pet.
Shut your mouth, Jerome.
Basically,
okay.
He's got all the weapons and everything like that, and he does his part. I like Corey Stoll. I think he's a great actor. And again, this was a part that he said, okay, you're going to elevate it to 11 of being the most annoying character you can be, just being vengeful and all trying to go after, trying to prove how bad you are because you have every single weapon, you can take everyone out. He did his part, and I think he did a good job with what he was expected to do.
Since we're talking about MODOK, can we go ahead and talk about his death scene now? Can we just
I don't want to do it now. I want to do it later.
Okay, all right, we'll do it in context.
I'll wait, yeah. Let's do it in context.
He really doesn't add a lot to the story other than just chasing Cassie around for a while, but
yeah, and that's about the extent of it. They're captured, and obviously we're going to get Venture to Kane, but let's go into Janet finally revealing the truth about what happened. Man, that was my biggest hope to see once I saw, okay, this is how they met. It really met my expectations of how they basically developed a relationship while she was helping rebuild his vessel, rebuilding the multiversal power core after he crashes. And the hope he gives her saying, oh, I can put you back in a time where you didn't disappear and you will never know, not being happy. And he does this, but when she touches that chair and sees exactly who Kang is, and it almost like he realizes saying, shoot, well, you know who I am, but what does it matter that you know what I did? I can give you happiness again, you know?
Jonathan Majors was the single best thing about the movie. I thought he did an absolutely phenomenal job as King. Right away, King is up there with the best villains in my opinion. Which granted, he's got a little bit. There's a little bit of an asterisk because he also was He Who Remains, connected character, but obviously a different variant. He did such a great job, and I loved that story of the two of them becoming friends, and then her finding out that, oh no, he actually wants to, destroy entire timelines, trillions and trillions of lives he's going to snuff out, and he could not care less. He doesn't care. That's his plan. That's what he's doing. That's one of those things where I'm like, either the stakes are Scott going after Cassie or them stopping King from destroying trillions of lives. Pick what you want somewhere on that scale. This movie definitely did have stakes, and I love the story that they did with King. I thought he did such a fantastic job, and the background. If anything, I wanted more of it. I wanted more. I could have taken another 20 minutes of the background of those two, but it's such a great job.
And especially when he comes in and meets Scott and Cassie, and we finally get the lines that we've heard and wanted to hear, and just his cadence. Jonathan Majors knows how to play a villain. He knows it. He does it so well. He's going to do it again in Creed 3 in a couple of weeks. Like, he is an amazing actor, but it's just how he delivers the lines. Like, especially like, have I killed you before? They all blur together after a while. Are you the one with a hammer? It's like he's dropping these lines left and right, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like if for those who have never seen it, it's just like he is creating for people that have never seen Loki and they're just seeing this character. It's like he's throwing this stuff down. They're putting these lines in there to make the audience understand like we're telling, not showing, because we want to show exactly like this guy is something to be taken seriously, especially when he's telling Scott, you're going to help me get back the power core that Janet blew up, basically. You're going to help me get it back, or I'm going to kill your daughter. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do right now and prove to you that I can do what I'm saying. I'm not just all talk. And he's menacing. I've said it before. He's proving that this is a bigger threat and more menacing threat than Thanos ever could have been.
The potential is certainly there. The potential is absolutely there. And I love the way they're going about it, just stepping outside this movie, giving us the different versions of the character and letting us meet it. And I'm kind of glad they killed him, right? Like, I'm kind of glad we're getting a new one. Like, we still have new versions of Kang to meet. And or at least they implied he died, but yes. we'll talk about that. But this King is so different than He Who Remains, presumably different than what we're going to see in Loki season 2, and probably at least we'll see at least some versions that are different. I mean, we saw him later in this even, and the King Dynasty. Like, I love the way they're doing that. It's allowing them to have a new Thanos, but they're not just making him like new Thanos, like where there's only the one version of him and you don't see different versions of the character, like they're going in such a radically different way with it. And for me, this big bad is so far, he 2 for 2, absolute home run, such a great job.
And, as they take him to the site where he needs to shrink down and go down there, and they tell him, you got to be quick or you're going to lose your mind down there, and you got to shrink down the power core. So, I mean, they told him what exactly needs to do. And that's what Janet said, like, that's Kang could be, he's from this far off future. He has all this tech. Like, Kang is not a super being. He has a lot of tech and very, very smart. So he brings all this future knowledge, which is why he was able to conquer the quantum realm, because he has all this tech. He is not like a powered being in a sense, outside of the tech he designs for himself. But he's formidable. He can fight. He's got all this amazing tech, but he cannot develop Pym particles. And that's why he needed Scott. And so when he goes down there, now that we got a name for it, because we were coming up with, okay, why are all these Scotts down there from the trailer? The possibility storm. Every single moment that he's down there creates all these different possibility variants of Scott, which was entertaining, I would have to say.
Yeah, and that was one of those sequences just visually I thought was really cool. I love the scene mirroring the first movie where they basically are all the ants creating the bridge up to to the center of the storm as they're trying to get this orb multiversal engine thing, and it was such a cool scene, and I love just how it exploded immediately. You have the random one with Baskin Robbins. I actually felt like if they were going to have one in there that wasn't in the suit, they should have had others also not in the suit. But whatever, that nitpicks aside. And they even did the same thing with Hope, where a bunch of different Hope variants, or variants, not the right word, possibilities showed up. I that sequence was fantastic. And that was basically the heist, right? Like, so it's going to be another heist movie. Kang wants him to do a time heist like this time. Kang has this big thing, and everyone, myself included, thought Kang needs him to get something. And if he does, he'll get to go back in time and spend more time with his kid. That was never what it was about, and the heist only took him 5 minutes.
Well, is it really a heist when it's like he's not stealing it from anything? He's just getting it back. Like, it's
he's retrieving it. So
he's retrieving it. Yeah,
you're right. Maybe heist isn't even the right word. Then it's not a heist at all. Either way, it kind of broke the mold there because it wasn't another heist movie, and I would argue that the first one, both of the first two were, especially the first one. That said, it's okay. It's okay that they did something different. It broke the expectations because certainly wasn't what I thought it was going to be about.
Okay, I've just got to call Phil out of there. That's brilliant. Didn't even think about that. This is also the 31st film, and Baskin Robbins has 31 in their logo for 31 flavors.
That's a good catch. Catch.
That's impressive.
I will accept that, and that they probably got paid a little bit of money, a little bit of extra money for doing that, so that's fine.
Well, they always find out, and they always know. So
they do always.
All right, so they were, I did like, as we saw in the trailer, all the Scots working together to get back to Cassie, because that's the goal. Get Cassie. We're gonna save her, get her out of this situation. All of them piling up. Janet, Hank, and Hope find, and I like how Hope has all those possibilities as she goes down in there. But it was just interesting when she does get there, saves Scott from falling into the abyss, that she automatically just kind of knows or just follows Scott's lead of what to do. Like, not asking any questions, just kind of goes with it at that point. It was just like, even just one or two people say, hey, I need you to do this. Oh, okay.
Sure, but there were a few times when they just acted on instinct together. There's a time later when they're facing Kang shows up, and they kind of both look at him, and they just immediately both shrink and attack. Now, yeah. Kang quite literally smacks them away like they're nothing at that moment. Mm-hmm. But I buy it just because they've already, the movie showed other times that they were in sync that way. So I buy that one.
Yeah, and this is just me being nitpicky, not saying this is why I'll rate it wherever I do. It was just one of those things that seeing a lot of these movies, I said, it would have been nice to see that, but I buy your headcanon at that point. They're just that much in sync. But at no moment did I ever think that them, even if he willingly gave the core back to Kang, he was never going to go and give them anything of happiness. Because again, he's going to use people to get the means to an end. His goal is to escape. He was exiled here. He was put here for a reason. And we'll get into more of that reason, when we get to the post-credit scene and everything like that, about what Kang the Conqueror represents to the Council of Kangs. But he takes it. They try to fight him. They're completely outmatched, especially as Janet said, why she realized she was completely outmatched. And, Hank's in the background on the ship, and that's where Kang goes out and has the same reaction. Wait a minute, your protege, here I am, said, Darren, what happened to you? And, he's crash lands out in the desert. Hope and Scott are knocked out, and Cassie's taken hostage again. No, she's kept hostage basically at that point. And, we're left at there where the heroes are down and out right now. Oh, yeah, and Janet. Oh, yeah, and he takes Janet, too.
He takes Janet. There's actually kind of a weird continuity thing when he takes Janet, because he walks through, the portal back to his base, his citadel, his headquarters with her. And, the very next scene is, the next scene you see them, he's in a chair, and his stormtrooper things are bringing her up to them, as though they just captured her. And it's you were just with him, but it's here, stay here. Let me go get up in my chair real fast, and then you can come in and see me.
Let me pose for you. Let me get.
It's like they're just missing a scene where he dropped her off in a jail cell for a little while, and then later he's bringing her back out.
Yeah, but yeah. So anything else before we head into the final act?
No. I think we're good to move on.
Okay. All right, so we'll take our next ad break. So, listeners, as you know, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they could be a bit loud. Give you that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. And we are back. So, all right, final act. So we flash. Hank's crash landed. He's kind of disoriented, and we see a creature walk up to him, and we later find out it's his ants, the ant farm. And I thought it was just, if we're going to get weird, let's get really weird. How the ant farm ended up, they were sucked in the quantum realm, but instead of just like crash landing at a moment's notice, they basically experienced thousands of years of evolution because of how they came into the quantum realm, or the pocket part of the realm that they entered, and became hyper intelligent, created their own civilization, and are even more powerful than Hank could have ever imagined. And so that is what has been going. He's been picking up his ant signal, and they've been trying to search for him.
Yeah, I've seen some criticisms that the ants here were kind of goofy, and I'm like, you know what? Ants have been a big help to them. I mean, it's Ant-Man, right? And throughout this franchise, this movie's no different. I liked it. I thought it was a cool little moment. They kind of had 2 little cavalry moments in that final battle. This was one of them. And for me, it worked. It was funny, and it was set up. Like, to me, I don't think it did come out of nowhere. Because, well, one, they flashback to show you the times that Hank was messing with his communicator with him.
Yep.
And at least if you're paying attention, you see a bunch of the ants get sucked in at the same time they did. So I think it was set up. I think it makes sense. It worked for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was nice plan of payoff, even though there was they're not just going to throw this off to the side and not have a payoff later. So I mean, especially when they said ants, what are ants? What are these creatures at that point? So I mean, it was good, especially when he says, how are we going to get Kang? What kind of plan? And they said, oh, the ants have a plan. They have an idea of how to do this at that point. But as you said, we flash back to. We never name. We just assume that it's Kang's city. We're gonna call it Chronopolis, but they never call it Chronopolis.
They don't. They don't. They never really did give it a name at all. I don't think.
No, they don't.
So, Chronopolis it is.
Yep, Chronopolis it is.
Kevin Feige tells us not to.
Exactly. So Kang and Janet continue to talk, and I think this is. I almost love this. I really love this. As we put these quiet moments of the MCU, this discussion between Kang and Janet was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. As Kang talks about the multiverse war is coming, and he talks about incursions, and he calls his variant the biggest threat to the multiverse. He says the multiverse is dying. They are children who play with time without considering the consequences. So by playing with time, Kang means that his other variants keep using time travel to create branching timelines, beginning destabilizing reality and triggering these incursions. Kang said he started this war to erase all variants because it's the only way to stop them from messing with reality and prevent the multiverse from dying. But he lost the war and is imprisoned in the quantum realm. And so remember, the quantum realm is its own universe. It exists outside of time. There must be some point of no return of a boundary realm that prevented Kang from leaving, and this is it. So you think about this, like the variants, again, kind of like He Who Remains. Wait till you meet my variants. They're even more sinister than that. Kang the Conqueror is trying to stop his other variants from destabilizing the reality.
At least that's what he's claiming.
That's what he's claiming, but it's an interesting kind of flip on this.
Mm-hmm. And I love that scene, and you mentioned it when he talks about universes colliding, endless incursions, and visually the timeline, like they show the timeline, and it's like it was in Loki, right? Like they showed the same type of timeline design. It's maybe a little different, but it's basically the same type of stuff. I love that visual consistency there between our 2 versions of Kangs that we've had, talking about the multiverse opening. And I kind of appreciate that both Kangs we have met, they're the good one. And that they're stopping or trying to stop the worst ones who are still coming. So eventually we're going to meet one of these Kangs that is going to be like the worst of the worst. But we don't technically know who that is yet, at least not based on just in-movie knowledge. But
Yeah.
I like this trend. And if they wanted to go to this well, a third time in Fantastic Four or something like that, introduce us to a Kang who says, no, the others are worse. Like, I'm the good one. I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. So we see Cassie still in prison. She basically finds a way to escape and rescues Jentora. What do you think about that whole kind of sequence with kind of Cassie working with Jentora and basically kind of, some people said, oh, it's her Andor F the Empire moment.
It was kind of, at least an attempt at that. It wasn't quite as inspiring as the Andor moment was, if you will.
Yeah.
But honestly, Jentora should have been the one that was rallying the troops. She should have been the one that sent out the broadcast to everyone. And
because they don't know Cassie.
What I did like about it there is at this moment, Cassie doesn't truly know if Scott's even alive. And so she's just kind of going on, right? And I do appreciate that. And I think that's I like that Cassie was involved and going for it. And she's like, okay, well, I'm going to bust this person out because they helped us already and see if we can work together. But the actual communication, the actual meant to be a more inspiring speech than it was, I think the wrong person delivered it.
Yeah, and especially, it's interesting seeing her utilize the powers and the abilities of, the Pym particles at that point. It's just interesting understanding, okay, well, obviously Hank's trained her some. Hope may have trained her some to understand this. Again, is she perfect? No, she's not meant to be, because if she was, that would be kind of a little interesting that she's even better than her dad at that point. But I like that she's still learning, but she still has some moves that she can do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But Scott and Hope arrive, and Scott's in giant man mode at that point. And I'm sorry, I got a chuckle, and I don't know if I was chuckling because of the line just being or just that it's pure Scott's like, we had a deal, and who are we breaking deals? I was like, dude, did you really, you expected the guy who was threatening your daughter was not going to be a good guy and own up to saying, oh yeah, I'm going to totally trust me, bro, on that one.
Yeah, a little naive there, Scott. A little naive, but I don't know. It was fine. It's not going to go down as the best lines of the MCU or anything, but I'm not going to think much about it.
But yeah, so Wasp and Ant-Man kind of get overwhelmed. They try to hold their own a little bit with Kang's forces, but they kind of get overwhelmed, and that's when the rebels show up, and so it kind of balances out the fight at that point. He's eventually able to break through the shield of where Kang's fortress is and takes down the power core that he's basically using to open up, basically the quantum realm for him to escape into the multiverse at that point. All right, Brent, I'm going to let you take Cassie versus MODOK because I know you wanted to talk about it earlier, so go for it.
Sure. So when they start, when fighting is the wrong word, when he starts chasing her, I appreciated the way that she was able to stay in front of him. She was able to shrink down and jump through these little bars and stuff, reminiscent of Scott trying to get through the keyhole in the first movie. She held her own. She survived. She eventually goes giant, right? And she says, I hope this works, and just drills him in the face. And I thought that was great. And I also like it because it's kind of her boogeyman, right? The person that tried to kill her in her own bedroom at 6 years old, right?
Yeah.
And you could kind of see the look on her face, and when she realized that's who it was, she kind of took a step back. She's a little afraid of him. All of that makes total sense. The dick line, just don't be a dick. I wish it had ended when she said that. Don't. Yeah. I feel like he took it a little too far. He's like, look at me, I am a dick. And then later, when he decides to team up with them or betray Kang would be more accurate. I'm not the dick or whatever. It took it a little too far there, I thought, but it was that scene is a good one. And then I did like that he turned it on. He turned it on. He betrayed Kang. He betrayed his abuser, right? And that Kang was his abuser. Let's be clear about that. His death scene, though.
Yeah.
Absolute funniest thing of the entire movie. I was rolling.
Yeah.
Scott, I've always thought of you as a brother, and everybody kind of looks sideways at it, and I guess
and then
at
he's
least
just
I'm
touching him with his little hand.
Yeah, the way he spits up is I'm going out an Avenger. Yeah, you're in. I that full on, I was rolling laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing.
I just like it. They look at each other. Did he just say, okay, sure, you're an Avenger.
Yeah, you're
sun's getting real low there, buddy. All right.
Yep.
And again, ridiculous. It's meant to be ridiculous. It's just like, oh, what's the matter? We'll call MODOK an Avenger at that point. And I know some people's like, oh, great, another villain redeemed, doing that moment. It's like,
was he redeemed? I'm not going to go that far.
Yeah, we're not going to go full redemption. I mean, again, he just got tired of it. I don't know if he made it through, we were going to get good MODOK at that point, because again, Darren Cross is Darren Cross. I doubt Cassie getting really full through to him and that he was going to turn a completely new leaf was really going to happen. But you are right. That is probably the funniest scene in the movie with MODOK's death. But, just prior to that, we get, Hank arriving just in time with all the ants, and they're able to turn the tide for the rebels and able to take down, Kang enters the fight and just starts wiping the floor with all the rebels with his, energy blast and everything like that. Like, I know some people are saying, he was just looking down on all his people, all his minions, kind of his stormtroopers, whatever you want to call them, taking him down, and he wasn't in a fight. It's like, yeah, why would he at that moment unless he had to? That's the reason why he built all this up. He's gonna let them do it, and if he has to enter, he'll enter the fight and wipe the floor with everyone. But it proves something, that he may be a one-man army, but that one-man army could also be can be overtaken with just sheer numbers as a possibility.
Right, and there's an element of like when Kane goes into the field, like now it's serious, right? And as soon as he does, he starts killing a bunch of people. But like he is a would-be conqueror, right? Like he's gonna let his army do the conquering first. Exactly.
So we, Janet. As we assume Kang is either taken out or dead, they think one or the other. Janet manages to get the power core back online, and she's able to turn it activated again. And she, Hank, and Hope and Cassie jump through, but as expected, just as that moment Scott's going to jump through, Kang comes out of nowhere and pretty comes close to beating. Scott hangs a little bit in there, but Kang's basically one step away from killing him.
He is. And, Kang even, like, says one last dig at him, like, you could have gone with your daughter. And it's like he could have. He had a chance to have run through the portal and get through and go back with Cassie, but he didn't. He pushed her through and stayed behind to fight. Credit to Scott for holding his own with Kang, but he was screwed. Like, he had no chance. And the only thing that surprises me is that he even got some hits in. But it's like, and there's this one shot where Kang, his arm is basically right next to Ant-Man's head, like next to Scott's head. And his arm is basically as big as Paul Rudd's head is. And I'm like, you're so done. You got no chance. Like, this is a guy who can go toe-to-toe with Captain America physically, and you're just Ant-Man, who you're basically tapped out power-wise. Like, your helmet's busted and everything, which we still need to talk about the helmets before we wrap up. But I thought it was a great fight scene.
Yeah, and people are saying, again, Hope comes through, is able, again, Hope has another good hero moment, saving Scott. But people complain, so wait a minute, Ant-Man and the Wasp are able to beat Kang the Conqueror. It's just like, let's remember a couple of things. Kang's armor is basically off. He has it, so it's basically he's just Kang. He's just physical, either knowing all the fighting, his strength at that point. It's just him. Now he doesn't have his energy blast. He doesn't have his armor. He's basically just him. So yeah, I can understand saying, but again, they still have a little bit of an edge on him considering what he's just gone through. So,
and as Scott said, he doesn't have to beat Kang. They just have to both lose.
Yeah. And especially at that moment, I never thought entering this movie that they were going to kill Scott. I thought that would have been really a bold move for Feige and the team to just say, let's take out Scott at that point. That would have been very interesting. That would have been like, well, I guess some people were right, but the stakes, I wondered where that would have gone, especially when I thought my prediction was that they were going to be left behind. And at one point I was like, I'm going to get 3 out of 3 for this one. For just a time, they were going to be left behind.
I definitely thought they were going to be left behind, and part of me thought, oh, that's awfully quick and convenient, but I guess they already knew how to build the tech, and they had both Jaina and Hank, and of course Cassie. Fine, I'll accept how easily they got them back. I did actually think and start wondering, are they going to kill Scott? And part of why I thought they might kill Scott is, well, one, out of the story at this point, Paul Rudd has appeared in, 6, 7 movies, something like that. 3 of these, Civil War, Endgame, maybe 5 movies. Fine.
Yeah.
It's like contract time could be up. But in story, when Cassie Lang really becomes, and then she never takes a name, but like when she becomes Stature, Scott is dead. Or Stinger or whatever. Well, she started as Stature, I think.
Yeah, she did. She started as Stature.
Scott is dead when that happens. And so because of that, I was like, they could set that up, have her basically more or less witness his death, and then from there, take her on her own path. And obviously that's not the route they went with it, but I actually did think it was very possible that they are going to either kill him or leave him there. And granted, if they leave him there, you assume he'll be back at some point. If they kill him, well, maybe not, but because comic books. But they didn't do either of those. They get out of it, they get back, and outside of some anxiety, it seems like Scott Lang got out of it relatively easy.
Yeah, and let's get into Kang. When Hope comes through, they're able to knock him into the power core. They fire Pym particles into the core, which causes him to get sucked into oblivion. And it's like, oh yeah, sure, he's dead. I here's one theory I have. Like, he's not dead. He's kicked into a portal that connects to another part of the multiverse or another part of the quantum realm, and that he's transported him outside, or possibly transported outside the realm, where he's hiding somewhere.
I certainly think that is plausible. I do think he's dead. So, fact or fiction, this we'll find out when he comes back. The reason I think he's dead is I think they're just going to keep going with different Kangs. And I feel like so far there's a precedence for that with He Who Remains. So we'll find out. But regardless, even if he does come back, great. I'm not going to be upset. But I think this particular Kang, the Exile as they called him, I think he's gone.
Yeah. So they're able to, Hope. Cassie manages to open another portal, get Scott and Hope out of there. And we get Scott happily resuming his life, and begins to, as he's walking through, he starts he's being happy, and everyone is still celebrating him. And then he starts stopping. He's like, well, wait a minute, Kang did say if he didn't get back to where he needed and he was killed, that would start a terrible war amongst his other variants. And what did I just destroy the universe? I'll just put that off to the side and focus on the good times at that point.
Yep, pretty much. And I thought it was interesting. At the same time, it's over. Advantage of keeping Scott around is he can now blow the whistle when Kang shows back up, and he's got history with it, and that the other Avengers will trust. Yeah.
So, but before we're going to take our final ad break before we get into the credit scenes and kind of wrapping the review up a little bit. So again, for our final ad break, as always, listeners, these ads help keep the lights on the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and we could be a bit loud. Give that 3 count before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be right back. All right, so we had 2 credit scenes. We're going to start with the biggest one first. The first one, mid-credit scenes. We now have met the Council of Kangs.
Yes, very, very cool that they showed that. I knew there was 2 credit scenes. I don't know what I expected, but I did not expect this.
That was one of my predictions. We would see other variants of Kang, and we saw other variants of Kang.
We saw other variants of Kang. We saw several hundred of them.
Yes. So we kind of meet the 3 individuals. Now, the first one we meet is, I'll kind of describe him, the one with the big hat at that point. He is Immortus. He is a variant from the very, very far future that is always manipulating everyone. He's always fighting with his younger self, Kang the Conqueror, and he is responsible for forming the Council of Kangs and manipulated Prime Kang to wipe out all his other variants in the comics. So that's Immortus. We also see the one looking like an Egyptian is Rama Tut, who is the first persona Kang adopted. Before becoming Kang, he was Nathaniel Richards, a scientist from the 30th century, a descendant of Reed Richards, who discovered time travel technology. He noticed a similar technology teleporting Kangs that were very similar to exactly the same of how Reed transported himself into the scene in Multiverse of Madness. Basically,
they definitely did this exact same effect for that.
Yep. But yeah, when he made his first trip back, he went to ancient Egypt and became a pharaoh, Rama-Tut. And that's also where the Fantastic Four come into play in the comics, because that's where he has his first defeat at the hands of the Fantastic Four as Rama-Tut. Now, the third variant, he doesn't look like anyone. Like, you cannot place his looks comic-wise. I've heard theories of this could be Iron Lad. This could be the Beyonder, who has been rumored to be the big villain for Secret Wars. Here's another one. He must have been really hated Kang the Conqueror, because Rama-Tut says that must eat him up that he couldn't kill him himself. So it looks to be maybe some also friction between Rama-Tut and whoever this person is. I'm leaning towards the idea that this could be the Scarlet Centurion. He's the third leader of the Council of Kangs and is the third major persona that Kang adopted from the comics. After he was defeated by the Fantastic Four, he ends up in present day and, inspired by Doctor Doom, starts taking on this persona of the Scarlet Centurion.
I like that idea. I don't like the Iron Lad idea, because people need to remember, like, Iron Lad was a good guy. He was the good king. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't get that vibe from but super interesting scene. I love the way they said they're starting to touch the multiverse. It's like I love that dialogue there.
So yeah, we see all these different Kangs out there in this Coliseum. They're all calling out there. Mortis said, Rama-Tut said, "Who did you call?" He said, "I called all of us." And here are the reasons for so many Kangs. So going back to Endgame, when you go back in time, you create a new branching timeline. This is why there is no way to change the past. By going back in time, you enter a new timeline you've just created. So now timelines are just separate universes. That's how we get the multiverse. This is a multiversal dynasty. Each Kang birthed himself with every branching timeline, meaning the Council of Kangs are the Kang dynasty. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and I'm not really surprised that we're seeing the Council of Kangs in the MCU. I'm just surprised at how quickly they showed him, but pleasantly surprised. I mean, definitely, it's like, you're doing it. You're right there. Like, yeah. Leo pointing at it, right? And very, very, very cool. Awesome credit scene. And, I like the ones that tease the future more than the comedic ones. And so that's what they gave us, which means surely the post-credit scene is going to be a comedic one, but I guess we'll find out here in a second.
Yeah, I like how they're saying, they're manipulating, or at least having access to every single universe and observe it, much like we saw He Who Remains observing it and kind of keeping the sacred timeline. Now, in the comics, the Council's HQ is in this realm outside of the time called Limbo, and it's a pocket universe that Immortus rules, where most of time travel takes place from. And they're saying the heroes are putting the multiverse they built at risk, because they're now controlling it. They're taking away that power from the Kangs, and that's leading to the incursions and ruining their ruling power over it. Now, in the comics, the Council of Kangs were never significant. They were basically Kang's lackeys when it came down to it. But my question is, when it comes down to it, it's always going to come back to Kang the Conqueror. It always ends up, even when he's trying to manipulate it, it always comes down to Kang the Conqueror. Here's the theory I want to put out there. What if this was all part of Kang's plan? What if if his variants knew he escaped, they would hunt him down. So now they think he's dead. Now, if my theory is going like, okay, he really did escape. He's preparing for the multiversal war in secret. He could possibly have infiltrated the council, take out one of the variants, and start manipulating it and from the inside, and when their guard is down and they're fighting each other or fighting the heroes in the Kang dynasty, he then steps forward and starts taking them all out at that point. You know, this happened twice in the comics where he did this. And, you know, both councils were deceived by him. And remember from Loki season 1, He Who Remains said he created the sacred timeline in the TVA when he won the war and enforced and protect the sacred timeline to stop the branches. When he is killed, the branches return, as do his variants. Now they always have existed because that's how time works. So according to He Who Remains, he will be reborn again at some point, and everything that's happened will repeat itself. Here's my big tinfoil hat. Kang the Conqueror and He Who Remains are the same person. Both are variants working against the Council of Kangs. Both are there to save the multiverse in their own way. All the Kang's plan were already achieved by He Who Remains. So He Who Remains and Kang the Conqueror are the same person. Kang the Conqueror is destined to become He Who Remains.
I like that. I like that theory a lot, and it certainly fits with what happens with Kang in the comics. You know, in the comics, there's all these different stories of him at different points on his timeline, and you meet him at different points. That would fit a lot. There was a recent Kang miniseries from, I don't know, I just read it, but I think it was from last year, which heavily goes into this kind of thing.
Highly recommend that series, yes.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was 4 or 5 issues, very good. Definitely read that. But I think you might be onto something here. Like, this is the kind of theory you should probably just make a note of so we can revisit this in the future. Because this is very, very plausible. And it would fit because you're right. He Who Remains says, you know, see you in a minute. Like, I'm going to be back. You're going to see me again. Maybe he meant metaphorical because you're going to see variants again. Or maybe he was being more literal. Like, no, you're going to see me again.
Yeah. It again, I could be completely wrong. Again, we read but this is fun for us. I don't mind if the theory ends up being completely blown up at that point and changed it. But it's something that Kang the Conqueror has been known to do many different times, and they are very good at adapting and changing and bringing it into the MCU. But that last scene where we see the Coliseum full of Kangs, I love it that they lifted that exact thing from the panel in Avengers 292. All the Kangs, including a Skrull Kang as well.
Yeah.
So, but the post-credit scene, Brent, this is my other one that I predicted a tease for an upcoming Disney Plus show.
Yeah, you did predict that one. And again, I'll remind you, they did it once before with Black Widow.
Yep, they did. Yep.
It's great to see. And there was a person in my first viewing that when this happened, as soon as it ended, well, one, he said Mobius was in charge of one of the people in charge of time. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to let it go. I'm not saying anything. Not quite right, but fine. But he did, like, he overheard me talking to my wife about it. And he just kind of chimed in real quick and said, it's really cool how important they're making these Disney Plus shows. I'm like, well, some of them more than others, sure. But I agree. I love that they're doing this. And if this gets, like, just imagine you didn't see Loki. You didn't even know about the Loki show because you don't watch it, the shows, whatever. The last time you saw Loki, he was getting crushed by Thanos and he's dead as far as you know. So, like, that would be a little bit of a surprise to you. Hopefully this, does push some people to go back and watch Loki season 1 who didn't watch it before, because I know it's one of the more popular ones, but not everybody has seen it, clearly. So hopefully more people do go back because it's great. And I love that both of these credit scenes tease Kang. They were both related to the Kang character. And, the comical ones are never as fun for me as this kind of thing. But doing this, like, I absolutely did not expect it. Fantastic job. Both credit scenes. Super excited to see both the Council of Kangs again, and specifically Loki in season 2 later this year. I wish they'd given us some sort of date, but fine, that'll come. Yeah,
and it's one of those like, okay, we're seeing this. This is exactly probably a scene from the season 2. I mean, it wasn't filmed for it. They just kind of took it at that point. We're seeing what it is, but we see like this other variant, Victor Timely. My guess is 1920s. It's kind of looking in that sense. And Victor Timely is an actual variant of Kang in the comics. He escaped and basically founded this town of Timely, Wisconsin, and he founded a robotic corporation that shaped the century. He later posed as a son and grandson later on, and he is the one who creates the original Human Torch, not Johnny Storm. For those that don't know, there was a Human Torch before that was basically a cybernetic being, a robotic being, an android, yes.
Who I believe in the comics made the foundation for the original body of Vision.
Yes.
Worth noting, we've seen this android before in the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
All the way back in Phase 1 in Captain America, the First Avenger, they're at the Stark Expo, and there is, as they're an establishing shot, you see the android body of the Human Torch in one of those, in a display case. So go back and take a look at that scene if you don't remember what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's hinting towards it at that point, and it's Jonathan Majors again, kind of portraying that exactly what it is going on. And I wanted to also mention that that comic, it's a one shot called Kang the Conqueror, Only Myself Left to Conquer. It is kind of the updated version of Kang's background for the current Earth 616 timeline of Marvel Comics. So check that out. It'll be probably front and center up there on Marvel Unlimited. I just love how terrified Loki is of him. And Mobius is there. It's like, what are you talking about? He doesn't look that scary. He's like, you don't know what I know.
Yeah. And it's just, it's nice. I know, I kind of like to jokingly remind us, Black Widow teased it also, but it teased Hawkeye in the way of, it showed Jeremy Renner's picture, right? This was a scene out of Loki, and that's awesome. That's awesome that they're doing that, and that's what they need to be doing more. They need to be pushing both while slowing down, and we've talked about that, and we'll talk about that some more next week, I think. They still need to push both platforms to drive people towards them.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So kind of as we, kind of lead to the end of the review, final thoughts, the characters we've got kind of left out there, where do we, let's just call it the Ant-Man family. Where do we think the Ant-Man family is going to pop up next?
Right now, I feel like Young Avengers is most likely. Geek Ledger in the chat mentions the possibility of Scott showing up in Captain America 4. That would make sense. It wouldn't be the first time that Sam Wilson called in Scott to help out with something, and that they have an established history there. So I could see that as being a possibility as well. For Hope, honestly, this sounds bad. I wouldn't be surprised if we really don't see her again, or at least nothing more significant than what she had here, which, wasn't very significant.
Yeah, it's right now. I don't see currently right now any projects we see Ant-Man and the Wasp pop up again, the Ant family at that point, unless we're dealing. I don't see them popping up in Loki season 2 at all. Really, it could be a nice cameo, but I think they want to keep Loki kind of on his own without having them pop up at least.
I don't think it'll go that way. I think right now I feel like we're more likely to see Loki and Mobius pop up somewhere else. I know there were rumors in Deadpool, for example, than we would see the Ant family popping up in there.
How about this? Maybe the Ant family, Fantastic Four.
I mean, it would fit. The characters are very much tied in the comics. Scott Lang has been an acting member of the Fantastic Four before. It certainly would be plausible. I also, think the idea of some sort of Young Avengers / Champions thing with that Stature or Stinger or whatever she goes by is involved with versus, maybe Scott would come along there.
Yeah. Kang, we know we're going to see many versions of Kang in Loki season 2. Outside of Loki, where do you think we see Kang next?
Right now, I feel like Fantastic Four is the absolute best shot.
Mm-hmm.
But there were rumors about Mobius in Deadpool 3.
Mm-hmm.
Allegedly, there's going to be a little dimension hopping, which wouldn't be the first time for that character. I feel like there's a non-zero chance that a version of Kang could show up in Deadpool as well.
Yeah. It'd be very, very plausible. I agree with that idea. All right, so first up, where do you rank this movie out of 10?
All right, let me pull those up. I've kind of hemmed and hawed over this for the last however many hours at this point since I've seen the movie the first time. I've now seen it twice. And I think ultimately, this sounds so negative, but I like the movie. It just doesn't rise higher for me. I'm putting it at number 34, which is right behind Ant-Man 1 and 2. And really, all three of them are probably so similar that you could flip-flop them and it'd be fine. This definitely had the best villain of the three of them, like not even close. King again was phenomenal, but I'm going with number 34 for now. Doesn't mean I didn't like the movie. It just means I was looking at my list earlier and looking at the time, cracking into the top 10 is really, really hard, and that is such a big group of movies. And part of me was almost like, at this point, I feel like I'm splitting hairs between number 20 and number 40, and I just need to, rank my top 10 and be done with it, and just say everything else is stuff that I enjoy, but it's not ranked. But for right now, 34.
How about out of 10 if you had to put rate this movie on its own?
Oh, I'd probably go, let's call it a 7. Amari Daniels says Ant-Man 1 had a giant Thomas the Tank Engine. Yes, it did, and I love that gag. It's fantastic. I think I'll go a 7. I don't know. One of these days, I'm going to sit down and hammer that out for everything, so I have a little bit better basis for comparison for what I would rank things. But sure, 7C, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm a little lower. I'm probably a 6.5. Probably leaning more towards 6.5 than anything. Just on the, as we said, Jonathan Majors, the setup for what it is, the plot of it, it's okay. It is what it is at that point. It's ranked right under. I have Eternals and Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special right before it, and it is above all the other two Ant-Man movies, but really at 33, it is above Iron Man 3 and Thor: Love and Thunder.
Wow, you were 33.
I was 33.
We were very, very similar on that.
Again, Brendan and I don't talk about our rankings till we get on the show. So
we didn't talk about this movie at all.
We talked a little last night.
Well, I texted you and said there was some weird shit, and other than that, we didn't really talk about it. But I going into this, I really didn't know what you I didn't have a good feeling for where you were at on it. And it seems like we were pretty similar on this one.
And like we said, just because we put it at towards the bottom of our rankings doesn't mean we don't think this is a good movie. It's just when you look at our top, I'm looking at my top 10, there's no chance right now for at least me, and if it does make your top 10, we're not criticizing it. It's as you famously said many times, it's okay, like them all, not like them all. It's I don't necessarily not like it, but it's when I have movies like, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, No Way Home, Black Panther, even shows like Loki, it's not of its level. It's just not. But again, it's an Ant-Man movie. I think it is the best Ant-Man movie out of the for the trilogy.
Out of curiosity, what is your number 10?
My number 10 is WandaVision.
WandaVision? Okay.
It used to be Shang-Chi was my number 10 until Wakanda Forever bumped it out.
Okay. Wakanda Forever is my 9, Shang-Chi is my 10, and then Loki, and then WandaVision for 11 and 12. So it's no, just to get past those, really freaking hard. So
yeah,
not impossible. We'll see, but we'll see. I actually have 7 Phase 4 projects in my top 15.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly not impossible, but again, my last ranked one is one that I enjoy, so it's fine. The other day, a friend asked me, has there ever been a Marvel project you didn't like? And I could honestly tell him, yes, but not from Marvel Studios, just other studios with the Marvel branding. Mm-hmm. But Marvel, no, I do genuinely enjoy them all to varying degrees. So I've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania twice. I should get to go see it one more time. I'll go see it with my dad because he couldn't go with me last night when he normally would have. And then I probably won't see it again until it comes to Disney Plus. But that weekend it comes to Disney Plus, more than likely I'm watching it. I will be very excited to do so.
And as usual, my next time seeing it will when it does drop on Disney Plus. So
there you go.
Yep. So, but all right. Well, that is our kind of review and breakdown of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Again, let us know, as we'll always say, as we always outro. Both our DMs are open on our own personal Twitter page, the Marvel Alliance. If you want to do that, I see those as well. So, as for those listeners, like if we're going to give everyone, like we always do, we're going to give at least 2 weeks before spoilers are out there. So if you want to bring us questions for next week, some theories you have, keep it to our DMs, so that way we kind of keep the spoilers that if you want to do it. And again, we're going to read those questions next week as well. But again, we're going to give it at least one more week before we kind of say free reign for spoilers.
Yeah, we'll definitely give a spoiler warning next week.
Yep. So, but all right, Brent, tell people how they can follow you, and do your new kind of plug, because you've kind of established yourself.
I was messing around with some stuff. Go to brentech.social. That's where you can find my links to everything I'm doing right now. It's just easier at this point because there's too many different individual things. So brentech.social will get you to me.
Awesome. But yeah, as always, want to thank our official sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. Use that code MarvelGUA at checkout to get $2 off every single order. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Balga. You can follow my other show, World's Finest True Believers, at Finest Believers. You can follow this show on Twitter at Marvel 8 Podcast. You can email the show at marvelalliancepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the Geek Ultimate Alliance Network on Twitter at GUA Pod Network. Feel free to tweet, email for modified feedback. Again, DMs are open across all our socials. Continue to rate and review the Marvel Alliance solo feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, the Geek Ultimate Alliance network feed. Rate us all at that point. We really appreciate it. Get that algorithm up. All right. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this review. Stay safe out there, everyone. And as Stan the Man would say, Excelsior, true believers. All right. Post-credits discussion is question. Are critics turning against the MCU? Right now, Quantumania, at the time of this recording, is critics rated it on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, we're not here to debate Rotten Tomatoes. We're just kind of looking at the discourse. But right now, we'll just use it as the algorithm in question. We'll look at that. Quantumania is standing at 48% critical. It is the second quote unquote rated Rotten movie of the MCU. However, audience score with over 1,000+ reviews is standing at 84% approval. So this has been, again, say what you want about Phase 4, but it seems to be looking in the sense of we look at critical reception of the projects of the MCU post Endgame. Are critics turning against the MCU? What say you, Brent?
I'm definitely closer to the audience on this one. Obviously, I'm a little lower if I rated it a 7.
Yeah.
But I went back and I looked at all the Phase 4 Rotten Tomatoes scores. And hate it or not, the Rotten Tomatoes score does matter. There are people who will look at that and decide that movie is rotten. I'm not going to go see it. I'm going to go see this other movie that's rated fresh. Okay. In my opinion, is that enough? No, but whatever. It's people's limited time and money. That's how they're going to do it. Most of the MCU projects have gotten in the 60s and 70s. There's been a couple, like Werewolf by Night, that was at 90. Apparently, Ms. Marvel says it's 100, but TV shows and Rotten Tomatoes, it's never clear to me if it's the whole show or if it's just muddled, one episode. Yeah. And so, even just forgetting the shows, like Werewolf by Night, which we know is a one-off, that was 90. Spider-Man No Way Home was 93. But like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was 74. No, I don't think they are turning against them. What I do think is happening is that Marvel is branching out even further. Now, I'm at the front of the line to argue that Phases 1, 2, and 3 was not just 23 of the exact same movie. They were very different movies. They had different franchises with different subgenres as a part of them, and that those movies did not feel the same. But I also think that doesn't mean Phase 4 and now going into Phase 5 with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, that's expanding. The types of stories they're telling, there's branching out, and because of that, they're basically going to more and more niche audiences, right? Like Werewolf by Night, a 1930s horror black and white thing, that is a super niche thing. That's not exactly a 4-quadrant project. And so whereas Spider-Man No Way Home was much more of a 4-quadrant project. I don't think it's that they're turning against them. I just think it's Marvel is now focusing less on casting a massively wide net and focus more on just, we want to tell these different stories. And if it means we're going to have, hit with less people, then that's okay. That's how I take it anyway.
Yeah, how I take it is something that you and I did mention to you last night. I've mentioned to a few people. I tweeted out to one of our mutual followers, DC Outlaw. Going into it, I said something that you taught me: don't let your speculation become your expectation. Mm-hmm. And I think that has become a big part of some of the quote unquote disappointment of some of the projects. I'm not saying the critics are completely wrong. I'm not saying like some of their criticism is like their criticism is completely wrong. No, I can't say that because a lot of them, they do have valid points. I think there's something to be said about some points that are that with this movie. I think particularly with this movie, I said before, this is an Ant-Man movie. This is not Endgame. This is not No Way Home. The Ant-Man movies have put in themselves what they are about. Now, is this the most elevated an Ant-Man movie has become in a sense of how it's going to be setting up the rest of the multiverse saga? Yes, because if you look at the first and second Ant-Man movies, it's as Clay had mentioned in the chat, like, very quote unquote, I'll put grounded. It's a dirty word in our circles these days. But it's earth-based. This is where we got weird. This is where we got really out there in the sense of, as I said, it got back to the roots of what the character was about originally in the comics. And that necessarily, when people say, oh, witness the birth of the dynasty, witness Kang. Okay, Kang really doesn't get, he's there in the opening of the movie, but when he really gets there in the middle and you really see it, it becomes kind of this is who Kang is. But again, it's a setup of what is to come. Now, some people are complaining about this movie, like, oh, if they really wanted to show a Kang was formidable, he could have killed like one of the Ant family, or he could have done something really serious to prove how bad he was. I see it, but again, that's not the movie that they were trying to do. You a lot of times, I think sometimes with the critics, you wanted a movie that you didn't get, and you're rating it on the movie you didn't get instead of the movie you did get.
I think that's absolutely true. David in the chat says it seems more and more critics are wanting an Endgame level movie, and anything less gets a bad critic thought but good audience scores. Spider-Man No Way Home was an Endgame level movie. That was a worldwide event. There hasn't been another one. Nothing else. There has not been another worldwide event from Marvel since Spider-Man No Way Home. And frankly, most of us were shocked at the level that one reached. Yeah. Most of us were surprised at that. Most of these things are going to be lower. Like Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness still made around $950 million, right? Like, I don't know if the critics are turning against them or not, but the audiences clearly are still coming to these movies and still watching these movies. Now, do I think maybe some of the people are holding off? I know for a fact there's people. I have a friend who has not seen the last couple movies because at this point he just didn't have time, and where he used to bend over backwards to make the time, he's content just to wait and watch on Disney Plus. Part of that is because of the sheer amount of content. He can't keep up with it, so he basically has written off the shows. So there are people like that, but he's still going to watch the movies. And so we'll talk about the content stuff more later, but I don't think the audiences, or I'm sorry, I don't think the critics are turning against them just because they didn't like this movie. They didn't like this movie. Okay, that's fine. The audience did. And ultimately, that's the number that truly matters. Again, the bad Rotten Tomatoes score does hurt. And I haven't seen I haven't seen any of the other scores from like the other rating things. But
it'll be interesting with a cinema score, because we'll see probably cinema score like Saturday morning, Sunday morning, we'll probably see that break. And that'll also be kind of another tell. I would probably predict that maybe a B, B plus.
B is I was going to say a flat B is exactly what I'm thinking. So, and that's not a great cinema score. It's really not. Like getting down in that, like people are like, oh, it's a B, it's good. No, like this isn't like your math homework where a B is pretty good. Like
yeah,
for a cinema score, B is not really that great. So if that is all it is, that's a bad sign for the long-term box office of this movie. And when you go to our fact or fictions about this movie needing to average $850 million, it's probably not going to get there. I don't think it. I mean, it's starting off like it might, but I'm betting with the word of mouth, it's probably not going to get there. But I still think it was a good movie. I mean, just
again, you rated it a 7. I rated it a 6.5. You say, well, you're saying that you're kind of defending it. Oh, it should be. No, we're not saying that. What also I'm seeing, and I saw a lot today, and I saw a lot of people that are comic fans, but they're more kind of general audience, like for Marvel movies. They're like, I don't understand why people are saying this is a bad movie or like it's so rated so low. Like they don't put it like as top tier MCU, but they're putting it like more upper level. And that's where you see that 84% among the audience. Like something's ringing true with this movie with the general audience. I don't see it like you're saying. I don't see it getting like A plus at that point. I'd be very impressed if it got a B plus. Solid B is where we're both putting it. And it's going to be, I'm just very surprised by seeing that general audience being more positive about an Ant-Man movie than I've heard them in the past be about Ant-Man. You know what I mean?
Well, that's funny because they didn't go see the other Ant-Man. Like the other Ant-Man movies did quite a bit less money. Now, number 2 picked up over number 1, but they were definitely on a smaller scale than this one appears to be. All in the Game earlier mentioned he didn't love Quantumania or the Eternals, but he feels like both Rotten Tomato scores are 15 to 20 points too low than what they should be. Yeah. I would probably agree with that. I mean, if you added 15 points to the Rotten Tomato score, you're right in the ballpark of where I rated it, and you'd be a little bit higher than where you rated it. So that's kind of where I'm at on it.
Yeah, but again, there are plenty of other shows that have broken down the problem with Rotten Tomatoes and the algorithm. At that point, we'll point you in different directions if you really want to know about that. But it was just interesting of something that I brought up to Brent, saying it's maybe worth it just talking about this and kind of seeing it. But let us know what you think. Again, you've heard our views on it. If you're seeing it this weekend for first time, second time, third time, let us know what you think. We'll be back to you next week. We'll see what the box office is, and we missed a lot of news last week at that point, so we're going to be breaking down that. We'll see what the next week brings, but we'll be back at our same time next week, 9:10 Eastern Standard Time on Thursday night, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.